Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for March 12th. We are meeting this afternoon on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Because we haven't talked about enough interesting things today, we have a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. All right, on to business. Utilities. I will hand it over to you.
Actually, I believe Ms. Glenda wanted to have a moment
Over
first.
to you.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. I just wanted to introduce the finance team. Roland Russell, who you know is our financial analyst, of course Christine, our CFO, and staff as a team have been working diligently on our utilities budget. And as you know, we like to address utilities first so that we can get the bylaws in place in time for billing in 2020. That is all I will say and take up time with, and I will pass it over to the experts.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I've been following along to the best of my ability, and I recognize that Council's had a busy day today. So I will attempt to make this as smooth and painless as possible.
All right.
Okay.
If there's a song and dance number that comes with it, that might help. If not, we'll just go with slides.
So here we are. Today we're going to talk about, we are presenting a utility workshop. Our goals for today are to review and provide input on the draft utility budgets and to seek direction on the utility rates and fees for 2020. Excuse me. Okay. The overall schedule for budget approval commences in November with today's meeting. And we have, today we are presenting utility operating and capital funds. In December or perhaps late November, if our timing is good, we'll be presenting general fund. And in December, we'll be coming back with the utility fees bylaws based on the recommendations we received from council today. We anticipate public meetings in January, and in February we hope to be able to have compiled the complete package and present the financial plan bylaw for council's approval at that point in time. The reason that there's a slight delay between the financial plan bylaw and the property tax bylaw is because we will be awaiting the provincial assessment, which generally comes out at the end of March. So as a result of that, there's a slight delay in our ability to prepare detailed tax rates.
And I'm just realizing that we didn't mention too that we've also gone out and done a public survey to date that council was apprised of last in October.
So our process for generating the financial plan information consists of a number of inputs. We have strategic plans, master plans, organizational plans, and public input. All of these items are used to inform the administration's action plan, and from there allows CLT to develop a financial plan. The utility component of the financial plan is being presented to you today. We would like to start our discussion by outlining our current, where we are currently with respect to our reserves. Due to the diligent work of council and the administration, District of Squamish now has approximately $9 million in utility reserves, and those numbers are growing as we move forward. there's not significant growth in water or solid waste, but there is a continuing growth trend in sewer. In solid waste, we are minimizing our reserve contributions. In fact, in 2020, we are recommending 0 reserve contribution, and that is a result of some fairly significant capital plan items that have taken place in solid waste, which have required some fairly significant rate increases. And at this point in time, we don't believe it is necessary or appropriate to push the rates further to allow for additional reserve contributions. In water, we are making progress towards our longer-term target of increasing our reserves over time to meet the requirements of our water master plan. And in sewer, we're making quite good progress in our reserve contributions. Just thought we would outline that as a starting place for our commentary with respect to utility budgets.
And if I could just jump into one of the considerations for our solid waste in terms of contributing to capital reserve versus potentially an accumulated surplus or working capital area is that the solid waste reserve fund is largely operationally based and will be debt serviced. So putting it over to a capital purpose, we don't have a lot of capital coming downstream that would necessarily be taken from reserve. Normally it's very large projects and we'd be doing debt service. So we're diverting any reserve or fund balancing over to accumulated surplus in this case.
Thank you. So, this is a rather busy slide, but it represents the first page of the set of documentation that you were provided. This is the top half of that schedule.
Page 2 of your agenda.
Yeah. So what we'd like to outline here, I think that the key highlights are that in water, we're increasing the reserve contribution year over year. We have a slight rate increase, as you can see, of approximately $105,000, and that rate increase is being used to fund an increase in our utility capital reserve contribution. In the wastewater utility, we have a revenue increase or utility rate increase of approximately $150,000, and that, in combination with a fairly significant reduction in direct capital funding, is resulting in a dramatic increase in our capital reserve for wastewater of something in the range of $500,000. In solid waste, currently we were contributing around $130,000 budgeted contribution in 2019. In 2020, we have a 0 contribution projected for reserve contribution. We have some fairly significant rate increase in solid waste, and that is the direct result of capital financing of the vertical wall expansion project, which is debt financed, and now it is time to pay for that debt. So as a result of the need to pay for that debt, we've had a fairly significant increase in our rates. The primary area of significant rate increase, it should be noted, is in the disposal rates charged at the landfill, as opposed to individual collection rates charged to individual homeowners. So this is more something that's going to be felt most directly by businesses, commercial or otherwise, that take their refuse directly to the landfill. It does reflect a...
Mr. Olson, can I stop you there? Councilor Reid?
Sorry, just seeing the column of percentages, and actually there's 3 of them, how are those calculated and what are they a percentage of? And so when you look at, for example, utility fee increases in the first line, $105,000, and then 150.7%.
Unfortunately, I will put my hand up and apologize to these extraneous numbers that to some degree are maybe not that informative. Unfortunately, the way that this is calculating is it's calculating the value as compared to the original reserve contribution.
The change in reserve.
So it's a change in reserve contribution that it's being calculated against. So $105,000 is 167% of $70,000. So I would stay away from the percentage increases on this chart. So my apologies. I realized this after publishing it that those numbers aren't really that helpful. So Councillor Race, good of you to point that out. We will make adjustments as required as we move forward with this form.
I should have cut that too, because we should just hide those.
Okay, so at this point, I'm actually going to stop and allow council to ask any questions that they may have at this point, because I think that this is a good place for a short pause in the conversation, let's say.
Make sure we're all still paying attention. Are there any questions
On this page?
on this page?
Or, well, to this point, I
This point,
guess.
on anything you've heard to this point. Councilor Petio?
Just, it's been a lot today, so. Apologies. Does this suggest we're on track with our current financial plan?
Sorry, does this suggest that we were on track with?
With our current financial plan, like the one that we approved previously? This is all consistent with where we thought we should be, give or take?
I'm going to suggest the answer is yes. And I know that kind of sounds a little weak, okay, admittedly, and I will explain why. Okay, I can't give you a more forceful answer than that. Our CFO, who's sitting beside me, has been working on a long-range plan, and within that long-range plan, it attempts to incorporate master plan information from various master plans and look at a longer-term analysis than just the 5 years in our immediate financial plan. So at this point, it would appear from my analysis that yes, we are on target towards our longer range goals, but I think that I might defer to our CFO, who may be able to address that more effectively.
I will do my best. I think that Mr. Russell's basically stated it. Right now, we drive all of these things based on master plans, so we're always monitoring to make sure that we're still touching on master plans and the philosophies that have come out of those. I will address this a little more fulsomely at a future slide in terms of some of the suggestions that we might bring you about staying in line with where we think we need to go, and some discussions around the health of the 3 utilities. So if we can delay for that, that probably will make some sense.
And just also too, on the 5-year plan, the year that's right in front of us is the most accurate and precise. And then it's a little more, not vague, but subject to change as we go out those 5 years.
That's true. We do make some assumptions for the 5-year, and the utilities are heavily guided by their capital investment. So we do try to do some form of 5-year capital planning. So they're not bad in terms of the 5-year complexion, but certainly there's always operational issues that beyond inflation we don't spend a lot of energy on past year 2.
The one question I had was about, do we have targets for each of the reserves that we're trying to get close to? I think we do, I just can't remember what they are.
Mm-hmm. So again, we're planning to touch on this, but
Okay.
Specifically in the Water Master Plan, we have a $3.5 million target by 2031, based on an older plan now. The water master plan, I believe, is about 2050. So we'll be addressing that again when we do the long-range plan numbers.
All right, let's go forward then.
Okay. So, onward. These are the key drivers of our capital plan. So the water meters, it's a multi-year program which we anticipate will wrap up next year. So I'm looking at Chris for a nod. Water rehabilitation and replacement, sewer, and in 2020, we have included the solid waste landfill gas flare. So what I should note is, okay, those are the major projects that we have. There is a detailed page within your package, actually a number of pages, which outline the specifics of the 5-year capital plan. Also included in there are definitions of what the various projects are and descriptions. I should say descriptions as opposed to definitions, my apologies. So we want to show you a snapshot on a 5-year basis. This is what the capital plan looks like, what and how it is being funded. You will note that solid waste has a significant project in 2020, and then after that we're not showing any significant projects over the remaining 5 years. That's going back to the comment that was made by Christine Mathews. That is part of the rationale for why we're looking at shifting future surplus revenue that might be generated in solid waste from capital to accumulated surplus, as we're not anticipating, with the completion of the vertical wall and the landfill gas flare, we're not anticipating any more significant capital being spent on the landfill between now and late 2020s. Okay, for water and sewer, or sorry, I should say solid waste water, corrected on that more than once. We have ongoing work that is required to maintain the system in tip-top shape and keep it functioning as well as possible. As you can see, some of that is being funded through fees and charges. Some of that is also being funded through development cost charges from our developers. Yeah, I guess that's who it would be. And also some proceeds of borrowing. Proceeds of borrowing associated with the solid waste gas flare are going to result, which will occur in 2020, capital, is going to result in a fairly significant increase in financing expenditures in 2021. And if you were to look at what I believe is page 3 of your analysis, you'll see a fairly significant jump in financing costs there. And that will result again in probably another fairly significant increase in disposal fees, again in 2021, to manage the additional costs of operating capital expenses and operating costs of the landfill. So now we're going to move on, speak more about operating budgets. But we could pause here if anyone has questions with respect to capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, and again, I apologize, I'm just not keeping up, but the 2020 had lower fees and revenues, like revenue from fees than 2019, and then less so in 2021. Are we planning on removing services or something? Because I would assume those fees and charges are coming in exchange for services we're providing.
No, in general, and I would look at this, and I'm going to suggest that it tends to be in the area of sewer, where the capital, where there's a slight change in the nature of the capital plan, okay? And as a result of the change in the nature of the capital plan, what we're attempting to do is maintain the level of direct financing for our rehabilitation program, which is roughly around $1.5 million, and then there's a few additional projects that are tacked on over and above that. So what we're seeing is that in 2018 and 2019, there were a number of additional projects in sewer that were funded directly from utility rates. And in 2020, that number is dropping from roughly 2.4 million down to 1.8 million, and it's going to stay around that $1.8 million mark. It might slowly drift down 1.8, 1.7 in years in future. So that's why you're seeing a reduction in the fees and charges component. That is not to suggest that our utility fees are going to go down. It's suggesting that the direct utility fee, direct component of capital spending will go down. And so basically what will happen is that the remainder of that will end up going into reserves.
This could probably just as easily be called transfer from operating. But it's made up of the fees and charges that we collect in the year. So it's a direct contribution from your operating plan over to your capital plan, and that's why it fluctuates depending on the size of the capital plan.
Councilor Reese?
Thank you. I was looking for that page, and I don't have it in my material. But, I mean, a couple of these things, I'm just not aware of exactly what the money's for. For example, wastewater services, second to last line, there's a series of numbers, but I don't have in the material an explanation of those capital expenses.
If you were to look at your capital schedule, which is in the package that you have, I believe that's
It's on page 7.
page 7, you'll see that there's a subtotal line in there against each of the utilities, and those subtotals match these totals that you see here.
So it's your intended capital expenditure based on page 7.
Okay, so that gives you the detail of what the individual projects are. This is just an overall summary that shows total projects year by year and financing on an annual basis.
Is that making sense to everybody
No,
at this point?
because it doesn't line up with what I got when I picked it up Friday.
Oh, okay, so do you have this, it looks like this, page 7?
Yeah,
Everybody
so I thought I
have a
was
copy
looking
of that? That one, yeah. So if you look into the sort of second box and you look at the annual costs, and then you'll see they're footed at the landfill gas flare, and then after number 19 they're footed, and after number 16 they're footed. Those are the list of capital expenditures that are being transferred onto this summary schedule here.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And then above it is just basically summarizing all the funding sources over the 5 years.
Yeah,
But this sheet only shows you the first year.
yeah, because that sheet only shows 1 year of detail financing. This allows you to see in greater detail the overall financing that's required over the full 5-year period.
Okay, so then this is where I wanted to ask my question. And I'm looking at water system repair and replacement, which is $1.35 million a year for the next 5 years. And my question was around how long that might continue, because I can remember when that program started about 10 years ago, and we were told at that time that it was approximately a 20-year program to replace the concrete asbestos water pipes because they were at or beyond end of life. But now it seems that, I think somewhere in the notes it said we're now 30% of the way through after 10 years, give or take. So now sounds more like a 30-year program. And so I was just wondering if there was any explanation of that, whether it's the kind of thing, because these were theoretically beyond end of life, are we incurring more of a risk than we want to take by stretching it out? Should we be thinking about accelerating the replacement program? So that was sort of the question.
So the water master plan does talk about this, and we have updated it since the asset management plan, which originally guided the 5-year lift on utility fees. So the water master plan that just came out in, I think it was 2015, has re-looked at all of that, including all of our growth and pipes, et cetera, over that period. And this 1.3 is now representative of that water master plan, that updated plan. I expect there is some discussion in that water master plan about there being a certain level of deferral that's even recommended in the plan in terms of ability to afford it over the longer term. But that number is coming straight out of that water master plan.
David can add a little
Mr.
bit.
Wilson, you want to add to this conversation?
Sure. So the water master plan, it has an AC, asbestos cement water main replacement program. So we looked at the condition of pipes and the pressure of pipes, and basically came up with a program that allows for deferring some of our low risk assets, and that basically spreads the cost out over a longer period of time, but ends up saving the district a fair bit of money as a result of doing that. So we will be continuing to replace AC mains over the next 15 to 20 years. It's just been spread out over a longer period of time in order to sort of ease that big capital push that was originally expected to be between 2020 and 2030. That's when a lot of these mains reach 50 years old, and that's sort of the date that would be kind of a typical design life. That's when it would be replaced, but we did this more detailed assessment, and it basically says we can defer those AC main replacements by up to 10 years and basically spread those costs out over a longer period of time.
Okay, thank you.
I think one of the other things that we'll just remind council of this, we might have some emerging issues that we'll get back to you on at a later date. And there is some question that we would like to move one of the projects back into 2020. So right now we're reflecting about 2 water main projects in 2020, and there are issues arising that might require that we put 3 in there. And so that would make this actually be 2.3 million on line 14, and a deeper draw from reserve if we did that situation. And we'll talk to you a little bit about, again, some of the strategies for recovering that reserve.
Okay, Councilor Pena?
So just if I understand from Councilor Race, it sounds like there was an initial plan for $1,350,000 per year for about 20 years, and now we're looking at spreading it over 30 years, which seems to be about a 50% cost increase over you're ignoring inflation. So it sounds like it's not just deferral, like our sort of expenses have gone up, which expenses have gone up. So is that sort of what's going on here, though? The price has gone up, and it's going to take us a longer time than we originally thought?
Through the mayor, so there's been a few different stages of master plans that have been completed, so I'll just quickly walk through that. In 2010, we completed our asset management plan that looked at all of our assets, and it really identified that we're going to have a significant push of infrastructure replacement that was going to happen between 2020 and 2030. That recommended some repair and rehabilitation. I don't believe that was 1.35 million. I need to go back, but I believe it was less than that. Subsequent to that, we did a water master plan that looked at this in more detail. I don't think it was actually 1.35 million as well. It was sort of mixing growth-related projects with repair and rehabilitation projects. Our water mains, our pump stations, our control valves, and sort of put it all into a pot. I don't believe it actually said 1.35 million as a single number. It was sort of spread out amongst different water infrastructure. So it's kind of hard to compare apples to oranges, but apples. There's no apples to apples comparison. But in general, the water master plan did defer and reduce the costs over over the lifetime of that water master plan.
I think there's also about a 4 to 5 year gap between the two plans, and yes, definitely construction costs have gone up significantly over that period of time as well. So even as it is, the water master plan is quoting, we really probably should be factoring in the engineering type cost indicators or cost indexing to the costs as we come out of the water master plan moving forward.
Okay. Are you good? Back to Councilor Rice.
And just to be clear, I don't recall what the original number was in dollar terms. What I recall from 10 years ago was about a 20-year program.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 1.35 I was quoting from was just for the next 5 years. It's right here. And I have no idea what it was 10 years ago.
Okay.
So, quick question for you. Are you planning on stopping and looking at capital with council at this point? Or are you going to actually go through and make sure they're on the side with these? Sorry, just bear with me. Are you going to ask council if they have any adjustments to this or input to this? Or are you doing that later?
Why don't we do that now? So,
There's one school of thought, which is council has had a long day.
yes.
Maybe going through all of your slides would just help stimulate our thinking.
Okay.
Or you can stop and ask questions, but might be better to keep going.
Okay. That being said, perhaps
Unless you feel there's something critical we need to
No.
discuss at this point.
in total fairness, I don't.
It might be easier for us to do it by utility
Okay.
and help our brains put a little bit of a box around it.
So at this point, I might ask simply with reference to, and I believe you said page 7, the document you're looking at? Yeah, because I don't, mine is not page number 7, sorry. If there's any questions about specific projects that are contained on that listing, council has any questions about specific projects, we'd be happy to answer those at this point.
Councilor Ray.
So there is, it's number 2, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. And so in 2020, we show 500,000, and then 2021, 2022, 4 million per year. And reading the notes, I just wanted to be clear in my mind. I look at this, if I interpret the notes correctly, as sort of enhancing what we have there right now, providing redundancy. But I think at some point, and I remember this from some conversation way in the past, at some point we have to actually significantly increase capacity. And I just am wondering, is that this project, or is this something else? Or are we now embarking on sort of doubling the size of it?
Through the mayor, so this is to increase the capacity of the plant, and that is in order to address redundancy. There's provincial regulations for different components of the wastewater treatment plant. We're going to be, the provincial regulations say that we require 75% redundancy of our bioreactors. So it's just a portion of our wastewater treatment plant. Right now we have about 57% of our redundancy. So we're lacking in that one component. In order to meet that, we're right now doing a pre-design study looking at 2 different technologies, methods of doing that. So these budgets that are in here right now should be considered as placeholders, subject to determining which technology we're going to be using, but ultimately it will increase the capacity of the plant in order to meet redundancy requirements.
Is that the same as increased population? I mean, are we talking about, instead of a population of 22,000 or whatever, now we can service 35,000 or some larger number?
That's through the mayor. The number that we're looking to reach is 75% redundancy for our 2031 flow projections, which incorporates the number in our liquid waste management plan, I believe, is 31,000 population. So it is a forward-looking number that we're looking to achieve.
Any other questions on any of these projects on page 7 for sewer or water? Councilor Rifer?
Thank you. In item 12, the fire hydrant installations, are these new fire, like is this new, is this a replacement of, like have a service life, or what? Just curious.
So that is in order to address deficiencies. There's building code requirements that there should be a fire hydrant within 90 meters of the front door of any dwelling. A lot of our water system was constructed prior to those regulations, and so now we're going in and filling in where there are gaps in our fire hydrant program, and we've been putting in, I believe, about 5 or 6 per year, and that's a 7-year program. That was in order to basically address all deficiencies district-wide.
So if it was a 7-year program, so we're 5 years into it, is this last 2, is that enough to get to where we are, and the future expansion of those is coming through PCCs or whatever to on the new development?
So yes, by the time we reach the end of that 7-year program, we'll have addressed all the deficiencies where there's too long of a distance from a fire hydrant. Future repairs and replacement of fire hydrants will just be through our annual water budget. We have the $1.35 million for water system repair and rehabilitation.
I have a question about the 2 trucks. I feel like for number 7, we had a business case for this last year. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then for number 15, the Ford F-550, that's a replacement. But it says in the notes that we only have $98,000 in reserve. So does that $20,000 get made up in the 2020 contribution to the fleet reserve, or are we going to fall short?
So I'll let you talk to it because you financed
Okay.
it. But
Currently, we're anticipating that we would take funds from accumulated surplus. Because there are some questions with respect to the fleet, the equipment reserve, we are working with Public Works to review the equipment reserve bylaw, and we hope to be providing an update on that bylaw to council next year. And at that point in time, depending on what our findings are, we may change the timing and nature of the bylaw in such a way that we will be able to fund more of the costs of replacement directly from the equipment reserve.
Yeah, my question stems from the fact that we seem to be falling short on some of these big purchases, but also as we think to transitioning fleets in the future to electric or to hydrogen or what have you, our costs could actually go up. And so I'm glad to hear that we're actually doing a more fulsome review of that bylaw, because I think we're not going to quite hit the mark going forward.
yeah, we're just waiting for some replacement costs for the items in the fleet right now to give us a rough idea of what those adjustments would look like. So
Great, thank you. Any other questions on this spreadsheet for the capital projects? Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, the next page says operating budgets. Within the 3 utilities, we have, we have 3 service level changes that are being recommended by CLT within the utilities. The first one is in solid waste, and it is for a bylaw enforcement officer. The solid waste would contribute towards bylaw. So the person would work for bylaw, and solid waste would contribute half of the cost of that position. This service level change reflects half the cost of said bylaw position. We're anticipating that the bylaw position may not start January 1st, would commence partway through the year. The second item is Powerhouse Springs, and it would be an increase in maintenance budget for Powerhouse Springs. I believe that Public Works brought a report, or reports plural, to council this year outlining that their were some structural concerns with Powerhouse Springs and our ability to maintain the same level of efficiency that we had historically, and therefore that they felt that it was important that we increase the maintenance costs associated with our main water supply so that we would be able to ensure that it functions appropriately on a longer term basis. That is the second request for $80,000. The third request is administration is preparing a workforce planning strategy, and we are including a contingency in the costs associated with the utility because we believe that a portion of the overall costs that may come out of whatever the recommendations are from the workforce planning contingency project may impact the utilities and the costs associated with the utilities. So we're simply in anticipation of the potential results of that plan. We're including a slight increase in utility costs to allow us to manage whatever those results might be.
Mr. Russell, can I just have the CAO speak to, for the public's benefit, what workforce planning is?
Thank you. With the HR department and Ms. Arthur's team, we have procured a consultant, and last year council approved a budget to work with us to provide basically an overview of the organization, short-term workforce recommendations based on capacity as well as long-term based on growth. Historically, we've done it more anecdotally as departments got busier, and this is a more strategic, comprehensive view of where we need staff and how to smooth that in so that it's palatable from a budget point of view, but also meets the service needs. So what we've done in this budget, and you'll see it in our general operating as well, is we've built in a contingency, making the assumption that we will need to staff up. It may tell us something different, in which case we would have done a financial plan, but rather than actually put positions into the budget, we've built in a small-ish, maybe not small, contingency for council to consider so that as we implement the recommendations from that plan, which will be finished in March of 2020, there will be budget there potentially. So that's a contingency.
Any questions on the surface level changes? Councilor Pettingill?
Yeah, so you said utilities would pay for half this new bylaw officer, so the other half, is that a presumption that there'll be 14,000 to enforce Airbnb type short-term rentals, or?
I believe that the position is being proposed to work in the first year to support solid waste and planning. And so my understanding is that yes, it is to assist in looking after short-term rental concerns, bylaw impacts associated with that. So we anticipate that that will be about the same amount of money, so another $28,000, which will be funded by planning.
Okay.
And that obviously will be presented to you when we bring the general fund components forward.
Funded from the general fund, and whatever fines or fees, revenues come into bylaw enforcement.
I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, just for clarity, we don't necessarily fund from a planning level, but it is thought that there will be potentially some fee structures around and business licensing around that would help to fund that other half of the position, and all of this would be under the bylaw enforcement department.
And then the other, if I may, just looking at the number of people, like the public works day working in solid waste and all of those things, I understand we don't, I guess, are we being too conservative in our estimate on the forest planning contingency?
Through the mayor, through the general fund, the workforce contingency, there will also be a line item there that takes that into consideration.
Can I ask, we've got 28,000 allotted for an FTE, but Mr. Rossi said that we probably wouldn't hire them until later in the year. So what does that look like annualized out of this?
We're looking at that, this is based on a full FTE of approximately $84,000. And so we're anticipating that they will be hired in April, so it'll be about 0.66 FTE, so twice the number that you see there. And it'll be $28,000 contribution from solid waste and a $28,000 contribution from planning to offset the costs in the current year. And we anticipate that the total cost of bylaw will be in the neighborhood of $84,000 on an annual basis.
And so the following year to the utility?
In the following year,
maybe
there will
half
be
of
an
that,
$84,000 cost to bylaw.
Okay.
So, the next, we have a list of special projects. We're showing 2 years worth of special projects, and that's kind of for a number of reasons. Partly because some of these special projects continue on from year to year, and also because we're working toward the concept of multi-year budgeting. Okay, and I'll just toss that out there, and I'll keep on going. Okay, so there are a number of projects. They are listed here on this slide. They are also listed in your package. They will be included, I believe, on pages, I'm going to suggest 11 through 14. And again, if there are any specific questions with respect to individual projects, we would be happy to provide you with answers at this point.
All right, any questions about these special projects, Councilor Stoner?
This solid waste bylaw update item is different than the one we were just looking at?
Sorry, can I get clarification of that question?
Yeah,
please?
sorry, so the solid waste bylaw update line item 68,300 is a different line item than the 28,000 we were just looking at?
Yes.
Yes, through the mayor. The 28,000 is really an enforcement officer to work on enforcement of single-use plastics, single-use items, bylaw, as well as the solid waste utility bylaw. The solid waste bylaw update outreach engagement line item on this slide is actually the part-time employee that has been hired for the 2 years to really do the outreach and engagement that comes before the enforcement, for the solid waste utility. So working with SEI and multifamily homes to start getting source separation.
So for clarification, one is on the service level change because we expect the bylaw enforcement would continue on an ongoing basis. With this particular one, it's intended to be a temporary or term position, and that's why we put it on the non-recurring list.
To follow up, it is the same position that we brought on this past year though, correct? So it's not an additional FTE, it's a carry on of the one that we brought on in 2019?
Through the mayor, yes it is. It's the same.
Other questions on special projects? I will ask a question to you about whether 8,000 is really enough for our engagement materials. It seems low, but maybe not.
Through the mayor. So the solid waste utility team, let's call ourselves, did work with communications to kind of draft out some key items and the costing, be it, for example, cheap ads or whatever they look like and the cost around it. And $8,000 is where we ended up. That being said, that there is in the solid waste utility
a line item for community projects. It's in our operating budget, so it's not here today, well, it's not as a special project. And we do pull from that for communications as well. So that's a little bit of a buffer. This 8,000 is really anticipated purely around this project.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on special projects? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now to the exciting part that we were all waiting for. What all of this means to our rates and